Airscape, The Fall of Gravity, is a weird combination of elements when it comes down to it. The cute art style is countered by some difficult platforming. The game may feel familiar to those who've played Super Mario Galaxy, with some of its peaceful music and its unique screen-scrolling mechanics. But the question comes in the fact, can the game get to the level of Super Mario Galaxy's platforming in a 2D form? Or does the light nature of the game, contrasted with its difficulty, leave an uneasy experience in the end? But before I begin these first impressions, this key was obtained from Evolve PR via the developer. Keep that in mind going forward in this first impressions. So the game starts out like this. You're just sort of chilling in the sea with your fellow creatures when aliens decide that they need some Earth creatures to observe. The only way to get them is, of course, pull them up with a tractor beam, of course. As one of the only creatures that was able to break out of captivity from the evil oppressors, it's your job to break out your fellow creatures and rise up against the evil aliens to topple their evil regime. Or really just break out your friends. In my mind, the whole oppression thing sounds way cooler though. And as you'll learn, it actually makes sense in the big picture with the format of the game. So each level plays as a typical platformer, and each level can have up to 3 creatures that you can rescue on your way to rescue one of the bigger playable characters. The idea here is that you need to rescue these smaller unplayable creatures to unlock the next big area. So it's simple. Try to be quick and pointed in levels, attempt to get to checkpoints and avoid hazards and various other things that will try to be your undoing, and they will undo you once in a while. Now, you'll notice during gameplay there's a movement of the screen that changes things around and around on ya. And that's the standout element of Airscape, The Fall of Gravity, is that your environment can change depending on your orientation and how the level is designed. You may have to move towards different elements that have their own gravitational pull. At least some of them do. I'm not sure why water would have its own pull, but hey, details. It does add a unique element to it. Although the question becomes, how much does it add to the game? To me, that's hard to say. Now look, you'll definitely notice different movement styles when shifting the perspective with the camera, and you may run into enemies because of that, so obviously it does affect gameplay. Does it overly complicate the game? No, not at all. But it doesn't necessarily cause a real revelation in the end. In the end, it feels like a typical platformer, even with the changing camera. But something that struck me very early on about the game is that for some reason you can control how fast or how slow the camera moves with you. I guess that's a help to those who may be affected by motion sickness by the experience, but really binding it to buttons? I mean, I guess it's possible to take advantage of that in some way during platforming, although I've yet to find it, nor did the game teach me that. I will say that it seems weird that it's on the scale that it is, going by 1% degrees. Maybe a 5 or 10 scale would have made a little bit more sense, as it can affect gameplay rather interestingly. But if you're feeling a sense of familiarity with this game, you're not the only one. It gave me feelings of Super Mario Galaxy while playing it, although it probably helped that some of the music... Well, let's just take a listen. Especially early on, it's probably noticeable that this game has been influenced by Galaxy in a couple of areas from what I've seen, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Although I will say in sound design as a whole, the squishy portion on the octopi jumping, I get it, but it doesn't make it less annoying. It's un-Galaxy-like there. It's good sound design overall, but that sort of stands out. But speaking of gravity elements, one thing I have to mention is that sometimes the gravity mechanic can play a little strangely. Like, you can end up killing yourself rather easily, because sometimes it's very hard to guess what is a platform you can go to and which one isn't. And of course, this can lead to a death or two that doesn't feel justified. Now, you'll figure it out when the rotation of the camera starts happening, but sometimes it'll be too late as you'll hurtle off into space. Now you'll go along and you'll need to rescue enough animals to unlock the next big area where you'll find another unlockable playable character. As you unlock these different characters, you'll notice a slight difference in playstyles. A new character may have the ability to float when jumping, or may have the ability to dash or teleport forward. But the basic elements are all the same with these characters. One thing to note, however, is that certain levels are not able to be completed, at least from what I can see, without the right character. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily tell you what that character is, and you can only change it at the start of the mission. Here's a hint, you'll probably need to use the last one you unlocked. Some characters do let for a little bit of an easier time on certain levels that others can still do, however, it was nice to have the ability to change back and forth between these characters. And this is where the strongest element of Airscape is probably the game's variety in not only the characters but in the levels. New elements and mechanics are introduced rather quickly, and they don't stay around that long in terms of the gameplay, which is really appreciated. You'll have acid baths that you can't stay in for a long period of time, or you'll end up jumping around the moon a couple levels later. And even with the elements that it does keep consistent, it's changing things up rather quickly on most of them. Now granted, these aren't huge overhauls from level to level, but it changes things just enough to keep things fresh, and that's all I can ask for. And as for the controls, they will take a tiny bit of getting used to, but here's the thing, you'll never actually be sort of perfect with them. There is a tiny bit of play in the controls for the platforming, but it's not to the point where it actively drags the game down. It's a hard one to really get accustomed to, however, because the gravity elements of the game. You're in water, you're in space, and of course they have different pulls, along with fans and other obstacles. You'll never get truly accustomed to the physics of the game in terms of precision, but I think that actually works in the game's favor in the end. Again, this does work towards the game's variety element. You'll have to adapt and you'll have to figure out what to do in terms of the characters and your jumping ability. Now, this game can be difficult. It's quick to restart, but some areas may take a lot of attempts, and if you were expecting a walk in the park with the art style the game presents, you got another thing coming. I will say that even though it may not be the most flashy of games, I do like the art style, in particular with the animals and your characters. They have a certain element of attachment to them, as in you want to protect them and not have them die in a horrible and painful death that they most likely will go through. Some of the environment works rather well for the aesthetic of the game is going for. However, one of the major problems that develop from the game is actually from its aesthetic, because it doesn't necessarily always go along with gameplay. Now I'll admit, while I'm open to different forms of gameplay and different scenarios, there's certain elements that don't work together in this game. Let's take this dark hallway for example, about what I'm talking about. Now notice the mines here, and when you get close, they'll activate and explode on you. Notice the lighting, and notice their closeness. If you slow down here, you're going to die, so you're running fast and trying to get through these obstacles very quickly. And then let's stop right about here. Can you see that missile right now? Now picture that while going fast, and notice the problem. If you don't know that missile exists, you're probably not going to be able to react to it in time, and you know how this is going to end. This may be the game's biggest flaw. It expects you to die to learn at times, and not in precision platforming, which is perfectly acceptable, but I'm talking where you're asked to take leaps of faith, and then lo and behold, death. Then you learn that no, you can't really do that, and then you have to play it again. I'm not a fan of games that do this. It wastes the user time for no good reason, and ends up being more frustrating more than anything else. Sometimes elements mash together in terms of mechanics in this game that work against each other, which can be problematic as you don't know exactly what to do. That's where the level design can be hit and miss. Some elements definitely work, but others lead to nothing but frustration. It's very inconsistent in that way, and that's not necessarily due to the variety that I mentioned before. I'm talking about within the same area with the same gimmicks. You could have one level be alright, and the next be something that you really don't want to do and actually want to sort of turn the game off on. Now, you can sort of skip levels to if you can get the other creatures from other levels, which is nice, but I will admit, sometimes this game stopped me in its tracks. And that's where the overall verdict of this game is going to be problematic for me. On one hand, if you like cute platformers and are willing to deal with frustration, if you allow the artwork and the music to sort of set a good tone for you, then I think you'll enjoy this game. Its variety is its strong point. You won't feel bored when trying to get through things, but you may get frustrated once in a while. But the thing is that when the game comes down to it, there's nothing horribly unique about this game. It's another platformer in a already crowded genre, and while the art style looks nice and the gravity is an interesting mechanic, it just doesn't do enough to really take a hold of that. Again, If you like variety in platformers, in particular with the idea of each level being really different from the other, then this game may be up your alley and may be worth your time. Otherwise, especially for those who not necessarily are enjoying platformers all the time, there's nothing unique here to really draw you in. It's for the platformer and for the person who loves platformers, and that's really what it comes down to. Now, if you like these first impressions, I will leave the Steam review in the comments below. I'm always taking feedback, so like, comment, and subscribe. Give me some information of what you would like to see changed and what exactly you think needed a little bit more attention paid to it. Again, this is Dragnix signing out, hoping that you have a wonderful day and just keep on gaming. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more of it, you may want to hit that subscribe button on the left-hand side. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, take a look at this video on the left-hand side as well. And if you missed my last video, take a look at the right-hand side. Once again, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.